What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Hello, brave souls. We're back in the, I don't know, I guess at this point, the universe of like Frank Sullivan and Marcus, I think his name was. So if you've watched the previous ones, at one point, there is a group of survivors that get left behind at the elementary school. This is their story. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll put links in the description for the other stories, but this is a standalone story. If you had never heard the other stories, this one can be listened to all by itself. So I hope you guys enjoy it. My name is George Patterson. I'm 74 years old. I taught geometry at Cedar Falls High School for 42 years, and I just watched 23 people drive away to save themselves while the rest of us die. I don't blame them. Not really. Frank Sullivan made the right call. The only call, really. If I'm being honest. Take the young, the strong, the ones with a chance. Leave the old, the sick, the expendable. I'm in that last category. Have been since my heart attack 3 years ago. Left me with a weak ticker and a medicine cabinet full of pills I ran out of 2 days ago. Even if Frank had offered me a spot on that bus, I'd have said no. I've had my time. 74 years is more than a lot of people get, especially now. But watching those vehicles pull away, seeing the barricade close behind them, that hit different. Like watching the last lifeboat leave the Titanic while you stand on the deck with the band. There were 22 of us left. Let me tell you about some of them. Helen Cosgrove, 81, former librarian. Arthritis so bad she could barely hold a fork, but sharp as a tack mentally. She'd organized our meager library in one of the classrooms. Books we'd scavenged, magazines, anything to keep our minds from dwelling on the horror outside. Robert and Linda Chen, 60s, married 40 years. Robert had stage 4 lung cancer. Linda wasn't leaving him. Simple as that. Miguel Santos, 57, diabetic. His insulin had run out on day 4. He was already showing signs. Shakiness, confusion, excessive thirst. Without medication, he had maybe a week, maybe less. James Whitmore, 43, youngest of our group by a decade. He'd been in a wheelchair since a car accident paralyzed him from the waist down 5 years ago. Frank had actually offered him a spot, but James knew the truth. A wheelchair in the apocalypse was a death sentence. Better to die here than slow down people who had a chance. There were others. Patricia, who had Alzheimer's and didn't really understand what was happening. David, recovering from a stroke, half his face slack and speech slurred. Karen, with emphysema, dragging an oxygen tank that would run out eventually. We were the sick, the old, the broken, the ones the new worlds had no use for. And we had maybe 4 days of food left. Well, Helen said, watching the dust settle where the vehicles had disappeared. I suppose we should organize. I had to hand it to her. Even facing certain death, she was thinking about organization. We gathered in the cafeteria that evening, all 22 of us, sitting at the same tables where children used to eat chicken nuggets and complain about homework. The irony wasn't lost on me. Let's take stock, I said, because someone had to lead and I was apparently the default choice. Food, water, medicine. What do we have? The inventory was depressing. Frank and his group had left us with what they could spare. But that wasn't much. Maybe 50 cans of food, a few boxes of crackers, some peanut butter. Water wasn't a problem yet. The tap still worked. But food? 4 days if we were generous. 3 if we were realistic. Medicine? I asked. Miguel shook his head. Nothing useful. Some aspirin, bandages, antiseptic. No insulin. No heart medication. No antibiotics. Then we need to look for more. Send out a scavenging team. With who? James asked from his wheelchair. Look around, George. Half of us can barely walk. The other half can walk but not run. Who exactly is going to go scavenging? He was right, but I wasn't ready to give up just yet and wait and die. I can go, said a voice from the back. It was Marcus Chen, Robert and Linda's son, 42, the one who'd stayed behind to be with his dying father. I'm mobile. I can move quietly. You can't go alone, Linda said. I'll go with him. This came from somewhere I hadn't expected. Thomas Bradley, 68, retired cop. Bad knee. Hearing aids in both ears. But he'd been a cop for 30 years and still had that cop confidence. We'll do a quick run, Thomas said. Hit the houses closest to the school. Look for food, medicine, anything useful. In and out before those things even notice. I wanted to say no. Wanted to keep everyone inside where it was relatively safe. But we were going to starve if we didn't try. Okay, I said. But you're back before dark. The second you see more than a handful of those things, you retreat. Understood? They nodded. They left an hour later, armed with kitchen knives and a baseball bat we'd found in the gym equipment. I watched from the roof as they climbed over the barricade and disappeared into the ruins of the neighborhood. And I prayed to God I wasn't sure it existed anymore, that they'd come back alive. They came back 3 hours later. I saw them first, running across the playground toward the barricade. Behind them, shambling but persistent, were maybe a dozen of those things. Not a huge number, but enough to be dangerous. Open the gate! I yelled down. They're coming in hot! We'd rigged in a section of the barricade that could be pulled aside quickly. Helen and James were on it. Helen pulling, James using his upper body strength to help from his chair. The gap opened just wide enough for Marcus and Thomas to squeeze through. They collapsed on the other side, gasping for breath. The things reached the barricade a moment later and started that horrible pounding, but the barricade held. What did you find? I asked once they caught their breath. Marcus held up a backpack. 2 cans of soup, a box of crackers, some medicine. Not much. The houses are picked clean, Thomas added. Anything worth taking is already gone. We'd have to go further out to find anything substantial. How much further? At least 6 blocks, maybe more. 6 blocks there, 6 blocks back. 12 blocks total through a city full of those things. It hadn't been risky enough at 3 blocks. We can't, I said. It's too dangerous. Then we starve, Marcus said flatly. Because what we found today, it's maybe half a day's worth of food for 22 people. We're dead either way, George. At least if we try. We die doing something. I wanted to argue. Wanted to find some other solution. But there wasn't one. Okay, tomorrow, I said. We'll try again tomorrow. But we need to be smarter about it. Plan better. Marcus nodded, too tired to argue. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the math. 22 people, 3 days of food. No way to get more without risking lives we couldn't afford to lose. We were in a death spiral. Too weak to scavenge effectively. But we'd get weaker without food. Eventually we'd be too weak to defend ourselves. And then those things would get in. It was just a matter of time. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and climbed to the roof to check on Patricia, who had been on watch duty. I'd been against putting someone with Alzheimer's on watch, but she'd insisted she could handle it, and we needed every able-bodied person. I found her asleep in a folding chair we'd set up. Patricia, I said gently, shaking her shoulder. Patricia, wake up. She jerked awake, confused. Where? What time is it? 2 a.m. You're on watch, remember? Oh, yes, of course. She looked around disoriented. Have I been asleep long? I don't know. How long since you checked the perimeter? She stared at me blankly. Patricia, when did you last look around? Make sure that everything was clear. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, George. I thought I could do this, but I can't remember. It's okay, I said, even though it wasn't. Why don't you go get some rest? I'll take over. After she left, I did a full perimeter check. Everything looked clear. The things outside had wandered off. The barricade was intact. But we couldn't count on Patricia to watch anymore. Couldn't count on several of our people for much of anything. We were down to maybe 8 people who were truly functional, and even they were running on fumes. I sat in the chair and watched the sun come up over the dead city, and I wondered if any of us would live to see it set. Day 14 after the outbreak. Day 2 since Frank left. Marcus and Thomas went out again. This time, they made it 7 blocks before they had to turn back. They found a pharmacy that had already been looted, but there were a few pill bottles in the back that looters had missed. Antibiotics. Not the insulin Miguel needed. Not the heart medication I needed, but antibiotics. I guess that was better than nothing. They also found 3 cans of tuna and a bag of rice. It's not enough, Marcus said when they got back. Not even close. I knew. We all knew. That night, we rationed dinner to half portions. People were hungry, but nobody complained. What was the point? David, the stroke survivor, didn't come to dinner. I found him in one of the classrooms, sitting alone in the dark. You should eat something, I said. Not hungry. His words were slurred, hard to understand. The stroke had hit his speech hard. You need to keep your strength up. For what? He looked at me, and his good eye was wet with tears. We're all going to die here, George. You know it. I know it. Why pretend? Because giving up means we die faster. Maybe faster is better. Maybe sitting here, slowly starving, slowly losing our minds. Maybe that's worse than just letting those things in. At least it would be quick. I didn't have an answer for that. I left him there in the dark and went back to the cafeteria, where Helen was reading to a group of others from one of the books she'd organized. Something by Dickens, I think. Her voice was steady, calm, like she was back in the library doing story time. It was the most normal thing I'd experienced in 2 weeks, and it made me want to cry. Day 15. Miguel collapsed during breakfast. Just fell out of his chair, convulsing. We got him to the nurse's office, but there wasn't much we could do. His blood sugar was dangerously high. We could tell from his symptoms even without a way to test it, and without insulin, it was only going to get worse. I'm dying, he said when he regained consciousness. His speech was slurred. His skin was clammy. I can feel it. Don't talk like that, Linda said. She was holding his hand, trying to comfort him. It's true. Days, maybe hours. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. He smiled weakly. Tell my daughter. He stopped, closed his eyes. Never mind. She's probably dead anyway. He lasted until that evening. The convulsions came back around 6 p.m., worse than before. He was unconscious by 7, dead by 8. We wrapped his body in sheets and put it in the freezer in the cafeteria kitchen. We couldn't bury him. Too dangerous to go outside. And we couldn't dig in the playground. The freezer was the best we could do. It was our second body. Robert Chen had died the day before. The cancer finally winning. We'd put him in the freezer too. 2 dead in this many days. 20 people left. And the food was almost gone. Day 16. Thomas and Marcus went out again. They had to. We were down to 1 day of food, maybe less. This time they went 10 blocks, hit a grocery store that had been thoroughly ransacked, but they managed to find some canned goods that had rolled under shelves. Some expired, but beggars can't be choosers. They also found those things, a lot of them. They came back with a haul, maybe 3 days worth of food if it was stretched, but Thomas had been bitten. It was on his forearm, just above the wrist, deep, bleeding heavily. Oh God, Linda said when she saw it. Oh God, no! Thomas looked at the bite, then at me. His face was pale. You know what this means, he said. I did. We all did. We'd seen what happened to people who got bitten. Carl at the post office, the reports from other survivors. You had hours, maybe a day, before you turned. How long? Thomas asked. I don't know, 12 hours, 24 hours? Then I've got time to do some good. He picked up the baseball bat. I'm going back out. I'm going to lead as many of those things away from here as I can. Give you folks a break. At least for a little while. Thomas, don't argue with me, George. I'm dead either way. At least let me make it count for something. Marcus tried to stop him. So did Linda. But Thomas was determined. He climbed over the barricade, bat in hand, and walked out into the ruins of Cedar Falls. We watched from the roof as he made noise, drew attention to himself, watched as those things started following him. He led them away, down the street, taking them with him. The last I saw of Thomas Bradley was him disappearing around a corner, a crowd of those things shambling after him. A retired cop, dying on his feet, trying to save people he barely knew. That night, Helen led us in a prayer for Thomas. I'm not religious, but I bowed my head anyway. It seemed appropriate. 19 people left. Day 17. The food was gone. Not almost gone, not running low. Gone. We'd eaten the last of it for breakfast. A quarter can of beans per person. Barely enough to take off the edge of hunger. What now? James asked. I didn't know. We spent the day drinking water and trying not to think about food. People were getting weak. Patricia was more confused than ever, wandering the halls muttering to herself. Karen's oxygen tank was almost empty, and she was struggling to breathe. David hadn't left his classroom in 2 days. That evening, Marcus came to me with a suggestion I'd been dreading. We need to consider extreme measures, he said quietly. What kind of extreme measures? There's 2 bodies in the freezer, fresh, and we're starving. I stared at him, hoping I'd misunderstood. You're not suggesting. I'm suggesting we do what we have to do to survive. Robert and Miguel are dead. They're not using those bodies anymore. And we're dying. That's... Jesus Christ, Marcus. That's cannibalism. That's survival. People have done it before. Donner Party, that rugby team that crashed in the Andes. When it's life or death, you do what you have to do. I can't. We can't. Then we die. Simple as that. We die with our morals intact. And those things eventually break through the barricade and finish the job. I wanted to hit him. Wanted to scream at him about that we were better than that. That we were still human. Still civilized. But I was so hungry I could barely think straight. And I knew he was right. Let me think about it, I said. Don't think too long. People are already too weak to think clearly. Another day or two and we won't be able to defend ourselves even if we wanted to. He left me alone with that horrible choice. That night, I lay awake, stomach cramping with hunger, and I wondered what Mary would think of me if she could see me now. My wife, who'd believed in the fundamental goodness of humanity, who'd taught Sunday school and volunteered at soup kitchens and always saw the best in people. Would she understand? Would she forgive me for what I was considering? Or would she be ashamed? I didn't sleep. Day 18. I made the decision before dawn. Hated myself for it, but I made it. We would do what we had to do to survive. I gathered everyone in the cafeteria, 18 people now. Patricia had died during the night, quietly, in her sleep. Heart attack, probably. Or maybe just gave up. Helen had found her, and we moved her body to join the others in the freezer. 3 bodies now. We're out of options, I told the group. The food is gone. We're too weak to go scavenging effectively. We have maybe 2 days before we're too weak to defend ourselves. So what are you saying? Linda asked, though I think she already knew. I'm saying we have resources we haven't utilized. Resources that could keep us alive long enough to figure something else out. The room was silent. Then James said, You're talking about the bodies? Yes. Some people look horrified. Some looked resigned. A few, the ones who were starving the most, who could barely think past their hunger, looked almost relieved. I won't force anyone, I continued. If you can't, if your conscience won't allow it, then don't. But for those of us who can, who will, it might be the difference between living and dying. This is wrong, Helen said. Her voice was shaking. This is fundamentally wrong, George. We're not animals. We're survivors. And sometimes survival means doing we never thought we'd do. Where does it end? We eat the dead today? What about tomorrow? What about when there are no more bodies in the freezer? Do we start eyeing each other? Deciding who's weakest? Who's most expendable? We're not going to. That's what happens! She was crying now. That's what always happens. You cross one line, and the next line gets easier, and the next, until you don't even recognize yourself anymore. She was right. God help me, she was right. But I was too hungry to care. I'm sorry, Helen, but I'm doing this. Anyone who wants to join me, anyone who doesn't, I understand. I went to the freezer. Marcus followed me. So did 6 others. Helen didn't. Neither did Linda, or James, or several others. I won't describe what we did. Won't give it the dignity of detail. We took what we needed, prepared it as best we could on the cafeteria stove, and we ate. It tasted like pork. That's what people always say, right? The human flesh tastes like pork. They're right. And I'll never forgive myself for knowing that. Day 19. We were split now. The 8 of us who'd eaten versus the 10 who hadn't. The 10 who were still hanging on to their humanity versus the 8 of us who'd let it go. Helen wouldn't speak to me. Wouldn't even look at me. James had moved to a different classroom, taking David and Karen with him. We were fracturing, breaking apart. But we were alive. Barely, but alive. That afternoon, the barricade started to fail. It happened slowly at first. A section of the fence sagged. A car shifted. Those things outside had been pressing against it for days, and the constant pressure was finally taking its toll. We need to reinforce it, Marcus said. But we were too weak. Too few. We tried. Pushed furniture against the weak points. Tied sections together with rope. But it wasn't enough. By evening, a gap had opened. Small, but growing. Those things noticed. Started pushing through. Everyone inside! I yelled. Lock the doors! We retreated into the building. Barricaded the main entrances with desks and filing cabinets. 18 people huddled in the school that had been our sanctuary, listening to those things pound on the doors. How long will the doors hold? Linda asked. I didn't answer. Didn't want to tell her the truth. Not long. They wouldn't hold long at all. We spent the night in the cafeteria, all of us together, because there was safety in numbers, or at least the illusion of safety. I could hear them outside, pounding, scratching, that wet, rattling call they made. We're going to die in here, David said. His speech was still slurred, but the meaning was clear. All of us. We're going to die. Nobody argued with him. Day 22. The front entrance gave way around noon. We heard the crash. Heard those things flooding into the building. Heard them in the hallways. Searching. Hunting. We'd barricaded ourselves in the cafeteria. The doors were metal. Reinforced. The strongest in the building. But I could hear them testing the doors. Throwing themselves against it. We have to run, Marcus said. Out the back through the kitchen. There's an emergency exit. And go where? Helen asked. There's nowhere to go. Then we die running instead of cowering. At least that's something. I looked around at the 18 people in the cafeteria. Weak, starving, terrified. The ones who'd held on to their humanity. And the ones like me who'd let it slip away. We were all going to die together. The door was starting to splinter. Go, I said. Everyone who can move, go, out the back. I'll buy you time. George, I'm 74 with a bad heart and no medication. I'm dead either way. At least let me do something useful. Marcus grabbed the baseball bat. I'm staying too. Marcus, your parents are dead. My dad's in that freezer. My mom. He looked at Linda, who was crying. Mom, you need to go. Please, get out of here. I'm not leaving you. You have to go. Please, for me. The door was giving way. I could see hands reaching through the cracks. Everyone out, I shouted. Now! They ran. 16 people, stumbling through the kitchen to the emergency exit. Helen was helping Karen. James was pushing his chair as fast as he could. Linda was the last to go, looking back at her son with tears streaming down her face. Then it was just Marcus and me, standing between those things and the people who were trying to save. The door burst open. They poured in like a flood. Gray faces, dead eyes, reaching hands. I swung my bat, connected with the first one's head. It went down. Marcus was beside me, fighting, swinging, buying seconds. But there were too many. Far too many. I felt hands grab me, felt teeth sink into my shoulder, felt the pain, sharp and immediate, and I knew it was over. I saw Marcus go down under a pile of them. The last thing I thought before the pain took over was, at least we tried. At least we didn't give up. I don't know how long I was out. Minutes, hours. When I woke up, I was on the floor of the cafeteria, covered in blood. My shoulder was torn open, meat and bone visible. I should have been dead, but I wasn't. I tried to move and I realized I couldn't. Couldn't feel my legs, could barely feel my arms. I was dying. Finally, mercifully dying. Then I heard it. Gunfire, close, automatic weapons, shouting, orders being given in sharp military precision. Building secured. We've got survivors in the back lot. Watch for hostiles. Shoot anything that moves. Medic! We need a medic over here! The cavalry. The rescued we'd stopped believing in. They'd come. Too late for me. Too late for Marcus. Too late for Miguel and Robert and Patricia and Thomas. But maybe not too late for the others. I tried to call out, to tell them I was here, but my voice wouldn't work. The bite was spreading its infection through my system, shutting down my body piece by piece. I heard boots on the floor, saw a figure in military fatigues appear above me. Jesus, we have a live one here. Barely. He's bitten, protocol says. Protocol says we bring anyone who's still breathing. Get a stretcher. They lifted me. The pain was incredible, but I couldn't scream. Couldn't do anything but let them carry me. Outside, I could see them. Soldiers, dozens of them, securing the area. Military trucks, a medical tent being set up. And the survivors. 15 of them. Less than we'd started with, but alive. Helen was there, and James and Linda. They'd made it. They loaded me into a truck. A medic was working on my shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. But we both know it was pointless. Where are you taking us? I managed to croak. The medic looked at me with something like pity. Somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere you'll be taken care of. The truck started moving. Through the window, I could see Lincoln Elementary getting smaller, disappearing behind us. We'd survived. Against all odds. Against reason. Some of us had survived. But as the darkness started to close in around my vision, as the infection from the bite burned through my veins, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd made a terrible mistake. That being rescued was somehow worse than dying. The medic's face was the last thing I saw before I blacked out. And he was smiling. I woke up to fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. For a moment, I thought I was dead. This is what the afterlife looked like. Sterile, white, artificial. Then the pain hit, radiating from my shoulder. And I knew I was very much alive. I was in a hospital bed, clean sheets, IV in my arm, monitors beeping steadily beside me. The room was small, windowless, but immaculate. Nothing like the nurse's office at Lincoln Elementary, where we'd watched Miguel die. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. My shoulders screamed in protest. I looked down and saw it was bandaged. Professional medical wrapping, not the makeshift gauze and duct tape we'd been using. The bite. I'd been bitten. But I wasn't dead. Wasn't one of those things. I was recovering? A door I hadn't noticed opened, and a woman in military fatigues walked in. She had a clipboard and the kind of expression medical professionals perfect. Pleasant, but distant. Mr. Patterson? Good to see you awake. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Morrison. How are you feeling? Confused. I was bit. I should be dead? Or worse? She made a note on her clipboard. You were lucky. We got to you quickly. Administered the treatment. You're going to be fine. Treatment? What treatment? That's classified, I'm afraid. But you're responding well. The infection has been neutralized. Another few days and you'll be back on your feet. My mind was reeling. Treatment? They had a treatment for the bites? For the infection that had killed Carol and Thomas and Miguel and turned half the world into those things? The others, I said. The people from the school. Are they safe? All 15 survivors are here at the facility, being cared for, evaluated, treated as needed. You're all heroes, Mr. Patterson. Survivors of a catastrophic outbreak. We're here to help you. Something about the way she said it felt wrong. Too smooth, too rehearsed. Where is here exactly? Fort Detrick Medical Research Facility. You're in Maryland now, about 3 hours from where we found you. We're the primary response center for the outbreak. You're in the safest place in the country right now. She checked my vitals, made more notes, gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Get some rest, Mr. Patterson. Dr. Fields will want to examine you tomorrow. In the meantime, if you need anything, just press the call button. She left before I could ask any more questions. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to process. We were safe? We'd been rescued? I was alive? Recovering from a bite that should have killed me? So why did I feel like I'd just made a deal with the devil? I was released from the medical ward 3 days later. The shoulder was healing, impossibly fast, actually. Whatever treatment they'd given me, it was working miracles. The wound that should have taken weeks to heal was already closing, the infection completely gone. They gave me clean clothes, gray sweatpants and sweatshirt, like prison wear but softer, and escorted me to what they called the residential wing. It was a long corridor of small rooms, like a college dormitory or a cheap motel. Each room had a bed, a desk, a small bathroom. Spartan but clean. Mine was room 247. Meals are served in the cafeteria at 0700, 1200, and 1800, my escort said. He was young, maybe 25 years old, with a dead-eyed look of someone who'd seen too much too fast. Curfew is 2200. Stay in your room after that. Don't wander. Don't try to access restricted areas. Follow the rules, and everything will be fine. And if I don't follow the rules? He looked at me flatly. Then everything won't be fine. He left me in my room. I sat on the bed and tried to orient myself. I was in a military facility. I was safe, fed, and recovering. This was good. This was what we'd hoped for. So why did it feel like a prison? There was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Helen standing there. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her. Clean, rested, the haunted look in her eyes faded slightly. She threw her arms around me. George, thank God, I thought... When I saw them carrying you out, all that blood, I thought you were dead. Almost was. They had some kind of treatment for the bites. She pulled back, studying my face. I know. They've been very careful not to explain what it is. Very careful about a lot of things, actually. What do you mean? She glanced down the hallway, then stepped into my room and closed the door. Something's not right here, she said quietly. They're taking people for treatment, or evaluation, or testing, and these people don't come back. Maybe they're just in different wings, different parts of the facility. Maybe, but George, I tried asking about them, about where they are, when we can see them, and the staff just smiles and says they're being cared for, and changes the subject. Who's been taken? Karen, David, 3 others whose names I don't remember well. They took Karen 2 days ago, said her breathing issues needed specialized care. Took David yesterday for neurological evaluations for his stroke. I haven't seen either one of them since. I wanted to tell her she was being paranoid, that we were safe here, that the military was helping us. But I couldn't shake my own unease. Have you talked to the others? I asked. James is in room 251. Linda is down on the second floor. I haven't seen Marcus. They said he's in intensive care, recovering from his injuries. I want to see him. They won't let you. I tried. They said only authorized medical personnel are allowed in the ICU. We talked for another hour. Helen told me about the facility, the cafeteria where we ate in silence, supervised by guards, the recreation room with a TV that only showed military news broadcast, the daily health checks where doctors examine us, took blood samples, asked questions about exposure to the infected. It all sounded reasonable, logical, exactly what you'd expect from a military medical facility dealing with an outbreak. But something just felt wrong. I met the others at dinner that evening. The cafeteria was large, institutional, filled with long tables. There were maybe 15 people total, not just our group from Lincoln Elementary, but survivors from other locations. All of us wearing the same gray sweats, all of us eating the same bland but nutritious food. James was there, his wheelchair parked at one of the tables. Linda sat beside him, picking at her food. They both looked up when I approached. "George," Linda said, "you're alive." "Barely. They told me about Marcus. How is he?" Her face clouded. "I don't know. They won't let me see him. Say he's stable but needs rest. But George, it's been almost a week. Surely I should be allowed to see my own son by now." "I'm sure they're just being cautious. He was badly injured. Or they're hiding something." This came from James. He was thinner than I remembered, his face drawn. "You notice how they always have an answer? Always have an explanation? But none of the explanations actually explain anything? You think they're lying to us?" "I think they're not telling us the whole truth. And I think we need to figure out why." We ate in silence for a while. Around us, other survivors did the same. Nobody talked much. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched, because we were being watched. Guards stood at each exit, ostensibly for our protection. Cameras were mounted in the corners. Everything monitored, everything controlled. After dinner, I went back to my room and tried to think. What did we actually know? We'd been rescued. We were being fed, housed, given medical care. Some of us had been taken away for specialized treatment and hadn't been seen since. That could be innocent, or it could be something else. I needed more information. The next morning, I had my evaluation with Dr. Fields. His office was in the medical wing, down a long corridor of identical doors. Inside were standard office fare, examination table, computer, diplomas on the wall. Dr. Fields himself was 50s, Asian, with a kind of calm demeanor that probably made patients trust him. "Mr. Patterson, please have a seat." He gestured to the examination table. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The shoulder's healing fast." "Yes, the treatment is quite effective. We've had remarkable success rates." He started his examination, checking my vitals, looking at the wound. "Any side effects? Dizziness, nausea, unusual fatigue?" "No, nothing like that." "Excellent. And mentally? How are you coping with the trauma of the outbreak?" "I'm alive. That's more than a lot of people can say." He made notes on his computer. "Indeed, you're very fortunate. The treatment we administered, it saved quite a few lives. We're hoping to scale it up, deploy it more widely once we understand it better." "What is it exactly, the treatment?" "A proprietary antiviral compound. Very experimental. You're actually part of the trial in a sense. Though, of course, we had no choice given the circumstances. Emergency authorization and all that." "And the people who've been taken for additional treatment? Where are they?" His fingers paused on the keyboard, just for a moment. Then he continued typing. "They're in specialized care units. Some of them had complications, pre-existing conditions that required more intensive intervention. We've done everything we can for them." "Can I see them? Karen Weber, David Matthews? They're friends of mine." "I'm afraid that's not possible right now, but I assure you, they're receiving excellent care." The same answer Helen had gotten. The same answer Linda had gotten about Marcus. "When will they be released back to general population?" "That depends on their progress. Every patient is different." He finished his exam. making a few more notes. You're healing remarkably well, Mr. Patterson. I'd say another week and you'll be as full strength. In the meantime, continue to rest, eat well, and let us know if you experience any unusual symptoms. He stood up, clearly dismissing me. I got up to leave, then paused at the door. Dr. Fields? What happened to us after we're healed? Do we get to leave? Go back to our families? Our lives? He smiled. It was the same smile Lieutenant Morrison had given me. Pleasant, distant, empty. Let's focus on recovery first. We'll worry about the next step when that time comes. I left feeling more unsettled than when I'd arrived. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the missing people, about the treatment that worked miracles, about the facility that felt more like a prison than a hospital. Around midnight, I heard something in the hallway. Footsteps, quiet voices, the sound of a gurney being wheeled past my door. I crept to the door and looked through the small window. 2 orderlies in surgical masks were pushing a gurney. On it was a figure covered in a white sheet, strapped down. I couldn't see who it was, but they were moving, struggling weakly against the restraints. They wheeled the gurney to the end of the hall and through a door marked, Authorized Personnel Only. I waited until they were gone, then slipped out of my room. The hallway was empty. The facility was on night mode. Minimal lighting, most doors locked. I crept down the hall to the restricted door. It required a key card. I didn't have one. But the door had a small window, reinforced glass. I looked through. Beyond was another corridor. This one looked more like a hospital. Medical equipment, bright lights, and doors. Lots of doors, each with a small window. I could see figures in some of the rooms, people on gurneys, hooked up to machines. It was too far away to make out faces. Mr. Patterson. I spun around. Lieutenant Morrison was standing behind me, 2 guards flanking her. Her pleasant expression was gone, replaced with something cold and hard. You're out of your room after curfew, and you're in a restricted area. I heard something. You were just violating facility protocols. We have rules for a reason, Mr. Patterson, for your safety and ours. I want to see my friends, Karen and David, and Marcus Chen. I want to know they're okay. They're fine, as I've told you multiple times. Then let me see them. That's not possible. Why not? She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Because I said so. Now you have 2 choices. You go back to your room and follow the rules and continue to receive the care and protection we're providing. Or you can continue to be difficult, in which case we'll have to take additional measures to ensure compliance. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. I went back to my room, but I couldn't sleep. The next few days passed in a haze of routine. Meals in the cafeteria, health checks, recreation time in the common room where we watched sanitized news broadcasts about the military's progress containing the outbreak. But I was watching now, paying attention, and I noticed patterns. Every few days, someone would disappear, called for specialized treatment or additional testing. They'd leave with an orderly and never come back to the residential wing. The population in the cafeteria was slowly shrinking. 50 people became 45, then 40, then 35. And nobody talked about it. We all just accepted it. Like we were too tired, too traumatized, too grateful for being alive to question what was happening. But Helen noticed too. She came to my room one evening, her face pale. They took Linda this morning, she said. Said she needed cardiac evaluation. George, I think they're not treating these people. I think something else is happening. Like what? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Helen, they've got guards, locked doors, and surveillance. What are you going to do? I used to work in a library. Libraries have access to everything, including building layouts, maintenance schedules, all sorts of things. This place is old, Cold War era. There are bound to be service corridors, maintenance access, ways to move around that aren't monitored. You're talking about breaking into restricted areas. I'm talking about finding out the truth. She was 71 years old, frail, had arthritis that made her hands shake, and she was talking about infiltrating a military facility. "I'm coming with you," I said. "George, you'll need help. And you're right, we need to know what's happening." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Tomorrow night, after curfew, meet me in the rec room. And George, don't tell anyone else. We can't trust anyone here." The next night, I met Helen in the recreation room at 22:30 hours. The nights were dimmed for curfew. The room empty except for us. "I found a maintenance access panel," she whispered. "Behind the vending machine. Leads to a crawl space that runs parallel to the restricted wing." We moved to the vending machine. It was lighter than it looked, probably empty. And sure enough, there was a panel. Helen had already loosened the screws. We pulled it off and squeezed in the darkness beyond. The crawl space was tight, dusty, filled with pipes and electrical conduits. We had to crawl on our hands and knees, navigating by the faint light from Helen's contraband flashlight. She'd stole it from a maintenance closet somehow. After what felt like an hour, but was probably 20 minutes, we reached another access panel. Through the grating, I could see the restricted corridor I'd glimpsed before. Helen unscrewed the panel as quietly as she could. We squeezed through into the corridor. It was late. The overhead lights were dimmed, but I could see the doors, each with their small windows, and I could hear sounds. Beeping of machines, occasional moans, the hum of ventilation. We crept to the first door and looked through the window. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was Karen Weber. At least, I thought it was Karen. Hard to be sure because of all the equipment attached to her. She was on a gurney, unconscious, with tubes and wires running from her body to machines I didn't recognize. Her chest was open. Actually open. Surgical incision revealing organs, tissues, things that shouldn't be visible. But she was alive. I could see her breathing, see the monitors tracking her vital signs. They were performing surgery on her while she was alive, without closing her up. Helen made a sound, half gasp, half sob. I pulled her away from the window before she could be sick. "We need to see more," I whispered. "We need to know what they're doing." We checked other rooms, other patients, other horrors. David was in one room, his skull open, electrodes attached to his exposed brain, computers recording data as his body twitched and convulsed. Marcus was another, strapped to a table, his body covered in injection sites, different colored fluids being pumped in and out of him while doctors in hazmat suits took notes. And others, so many others, all alive, all conscious on some level, all being experimented on like lab rats. "Oh God," Helen breathed. "They're not treating us. They're studying us. We're test subjects." That's when I saw him. Miguel Santos. He died at Lincoln Elementary. I'd watched him die. We put his body in the freezer. And then Marcus and I was going to be sick. But Miguel was here. Alive, sort of. His body was gray. His eyes clouded over like one of those things. But he was restrained. And doctors were running tests on him. Taking samples, injecting him with compounds and watching the reactions. They'd brought him back. Or they'd never let him die. They turned him into one of those things, and they were studying him. "The treatment," I said, the pieces falling into place. "The treatment they gave me. It wasn't to cure the infection. It was to control it. To see if they could manage it, weaponize it, use it." "We're not survivors," Helen said. "We're specimens." That's when the alarm started. Loud, blaring lights flashing red. We'd been spotted. Of course we had. Cameras everywhere. "Run!" I grabbed Helen's hand and we ran back toward the access panel. But guards were already there, coming down the corridor, weapons drawn. We were trapped. Lieutenant Morrison emerged from a side door, her face calm, almost amused. "Mr. Patterson, Miss Cosgrove, I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. You were doing so well." "You're experimenting on us," I said. "You're using us as test subjects." "We're trying to save humanity," she corrected. "The infection is spreading. It's already wiped out half the country. We need to understand it. Need to find a way to control it. Cure it. Use it. And yes, that requires testing, requires subjects. You should be honored. You're helping ensure the survival of the species. By torturing people? By keeping them alive while you cut them open? By doing what's necessary. The old world is gone, Mr. Patterson. The rules have changed. We do what we must to survive. The guards moved closer, raising their weapons. What are you going to do? Helen asked. Kill us? Kill you? No. That would be wasteful, Morrison smiled. You're going to join the others in the research wing. We have so much to learn, and you've both proven to be resilient subjects. You'll contribute far more to science than you ever did in your old lives. I looked at Helen, saw the fear in her eyes, the resignation. We'd escaped the zombies, survived the apocalypse, been rescued by the cavalry, and we'd ended up somewhere worse. The guards grabbed us, started dragging us toward the medical wing. I fought. So did Helen. But we were old, weak, and outnumbered. They strapped me to a gurney, wheeled me into one of the rooms, started hooking up the machines, the monitors, the tubes. Dr. Fields appeared from above me, his face impassive behind a surgical mask. I'm sorry it came to this, Mr. Patterson. You should have lived comfortably if you'd just followed the rules. But don't worry. Your sacrifice will help millions. He prepared a syringe, something green, viscous. This will hurt, he said. Quite a lot, actually. But the data we gather will be invaluable. I felt the needle pierce my skin, felt the burning as the compound entered my veins, felt my body start to change. The last coherent thought I had before the pain took over was, we should have stayed at the elementary school. At least there, we would have died human. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It started where Dr. Fields had injected the compound, a burning that spread through my veins like liquid fire. Within seconds, it reached my chest, and I felt my heart stutter, racing, then slowing, then racing again as my body tried to fight off whatever they'd put in me. I tried to scream, but something was in my throat, a tube, forcing air into my lungs at regulated intervals. I was intubated, unable to speak, unable to do anything but lie there and feel my body being torn apart from the inside. Through my blurred vision, I could see Dr. Fields and his team. They were talking, pointing at monitors, making notes. Clinical, detached, like I was a specimen in a petri dish, not a human being who'd taught high school geometry for 42 years, who'd had a wife and a life and dreams that didn't involve being tortured in a military black site. The compound reached my brain, and everything went white. I don't know how long I was unconscious. Time lost meaning in that room. When I finally surfaced, groggy and disoriented, I realized they removed the breathing tube. I was still strapped to the gurney, still hooked up to a dozen machines, but I could breathe on my own now, could turn my head slightly to look around. The room was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, concrete walls painted institutional white. The only furniture was the gurney I was strapped to and a rolling cart filled with medical equipment. A camera was mounted in the corner, its red light blinking steadily, always watching. The door had a window. Through it, I could see the corridor, other doors, the occasional orderly or doctor walking past. Nobody looked in. Nobody acknowledged that there was a human being in here. I tried to assess my condition. The pain had subsided to a dull, persistent ache that radiated from my core. My shoulder, the one that had been bitten, throbbed, but differently than before. Not healing pain. Something else. Something wrong. I managed to turn my head enough to see it. The bandage was gone, revealing the wound. It had changed. The bike mark was still there, but the tissue around it had turned gray. Not infected looking, not necrotic, just gray, like the skin of those things. And it was spreading, slowly, a few millimeters at a time, gray creeping across my shoulder toward my chest. They were turning me into one of them. Deliberately, methodically, while keeping me conscious enough to experience it. I wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to beg them to kill me, end this nightmare. But I couldn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I started counting. counting the tiles on the ceiling. 48. Counting my breaths. 16 per minute. Counting the beeps from the heart monitor. 62 beats per minute. Slightly elevated, but stable. Anything to keep my mind focused. To keep myself human while my body betrayed me. The door opened, and Dr. Fields entered, followed by a younger doctor I hadn't seen before. They were discussing something, looking at a tablet. Subject 247 is responding well to the modified strain, the younger doctor said. Infection rate is controlled. Cognitive function appears intact. This is exactly what we were hoping for. Indeed, Dr. Fields replied. He approached my gurney, shining a light in my eyes. Mr. Patterson, can you hear me? I wanted to ignore him, wanted to deny him even that small acknowledgement, but I needed information, needed to understand what they were doing to me. Yes, I croaked. My voice was raspy from the intubation. Excellent. How do you feel? Like you're turning me into a monster. He made a note on his tablet. Cognitive function intact, lucid, capable of complex reasoning. Good. Tell me, are you experiencing any unusual sensations? Hunger? Aggression? Loss of impulse control? I was experiencing all those things. A gnawing hunger that had nothing to do with food. An anger so intense I wanted to tear free of these restraints and hurt him. Hurt all of them. And a creeping sense that something fundamental inside me was changing. That the person I'd been was being overwritten by something else. But I wasn't going to tell him. Fuck you, I said instead. He smiled. Defiant, that's good. The retention of personality is crucial. Subject 198 lost all higher functions within 48 hours. But you're maintaining yourself despite the transformation. That's valuable data. I'm not data. I'm a person. You were a person. Now you're something more important. You're the bridge between human and infected. If we can perfect the process, create controlled infection, maintain cognitive function while gaining the enhanced physical traits of the infected, we'll have created the perfect soldier. Impossible to kill. No need for food or sleep. Absolute obedience. You're insane. I'm practical. The world has changed, Mr. Patterson. The old rules don't apply. We need every advantage we can get to survive, to rebuild. And you're going to help us achieve that, whether you want to or not. He left, taking the younger doctor with him. The door locked with a mechanical click. I was alone again with my thoughts, my changing body, and the slow, creeping horror of what I was becoming. The next several days, or weeks, I lost track, were a blur of pain and procedures. They injected me with different compounds, each one bringing new agonies. Some made the gray spread faster. Others slowed it down. One made my muscles spasm so violently I thought I'd break my own bones against the restraints. They took samples constantly. Blood, tissue, spinal fluid. They'd cut into me without anesthetic. The infected don't feel pain, Dr. Fields explained. So you shouldn't either, if the transformation is progressing correctly. But I did feel the pain. Every cut, every needle, every violation. I felt it all. And I was changing. The gray had spread across my shoulder, down my arm, creeping toward my chest and neck. My fingers had started to curl involuntarily, the joints stiffening. My vision was changing too. Colors looked different, washed out. But I could see better in the dim light. Could hear things I shouldn't be able to hear. Conversations in the hallway. Heartbeats of the orderlies when they came too close. I was becoming one of them. But unlike the shambling corpses outside, I was still me. Still George Patterson. Still aware. Still trapped in a body that was being transformed into something monstrous. The worst part wasn't the physical changes. It was the hunger. It started as a dull ache in my gut, easy to ignore. But it grew, day by day, hour by hour, until it was a screaming need that consumed every thought. I was hungry in a way I'd never experienced, not even during those desperate last days of the elementary school. And what I was hungry for wasn't food. When the orderlies came in to change my IV or take samples, I could smell them. Smell the blood pumping through the veins, the meat beneath their skin. My mouth would water. My hands would clench against the restraints. I wanted to bite them, tear them, feed. And that's when I knew Dr. Fields was winning. Whatever remained of George Patterson was being drowned up by the thing they were creating. I don't know how long it's been. A week? 2? When they brought someone into the room next to mine. I could hear them through the wall, crying, begging. A woman's voice I recognized. Helen. They'd started on her too. I'd pressed my ear against the wall, listening. I could hear Dr. Fields' voice, calm and clinical, explaining what they were going to do to her. I could hear Helen pleading with them to stop, to just kill her, anything but this. Then I heard a scream. It went on for hours. Eventually it faded to whimpers, then silence. I tried calling out to her, tried to offer some comfort, some connection to humanity, but my voice was gone. The transformation had done something to my vocal cords. All I could manage was a wet, rattling sound. The same sound those things made. I gave up trying to speak after that. It was Dr. Fields' assistant, the younger doctor whose name I learned was Dr. Sarah Vance, who finally told me the truth. She came in alone one night, late, when the facility was quiet. She looked tired, troubled. She checked my vitals, made some notes, then did something unexpected. She loosened one of my restraints. Just slightly. Just enough that I had a bit of movement. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for what we're doing to you. For all of this." I managed to turn my head to look at her. Tried to form words, but all that came out was that horrible rattling. She understood anyway. Why? Because the world ended and the people in charge decided that morality was a luxury we couldn't afford anymore. Because they think creating controlled infected is the answer. Because I'm too much of a coward to stop it. She sat down in the chair beside my gurney. "There are 16 of you in this wing. Subjects from the elementary school and other survivor groups. They're testing different strains, different control mechanisms. Most of them have lost cognitive function completely. But you, and Miss Cosgrove next door, you're both maintaining awareness. That makes you valuable. That means they'll keep you alive. Keep experimenting. Maybe for months." She looked at me with something like pity. "I wish I could tell you it gets better. That you'll adapt and stop feeling the pain. But you won't. The treatment preserves consciousness specifically so they can study how the infection affects cognition. You'll be aware through all of it. Every step of the transformation." I tried to ask about Helen, about the others, but couldn't form the words. "Your friend is holding on," Dr. Vance said, "but she's further along than you. Maybe another week before she loses herself completely. The others, most of them are already gone. They're in the sub-basement now, in holding pens, mindless and violent. They're going to deploy them eventually, use them as weapons, living dead soldiers who follow commands and can't be killed." She stood up, adjusted my restraints back to their original position. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I know that doesn't mean anything, but I wanted you to know that someone here sees you as a person, not just Subject 247, for whatever that's worth." She left. I lay there in the dark, processing what she'd told me. 16 test subjects, most already lost, Helen fading, me trapped in a body that was betraying me, being kept alive for the sole purpose of being studied. This was my future. This was how George Patterson's story ended. Not as a survivor, not as a hero, as a lab rat in a facility that had abandoned its humanity in the name of survival. The transformation reached my face around what I estimated was day 20. I could feel it in the mirror they had installed above my gurney. "So subjects can observe their own transformation," Dr. Fields had explained cheerfully. My skin was taking on that gray pallor. My eyes were clouding over. My lips had pulled back from my teeth in a permanent grimace. I looked like one of them. But inside, I was still me. Still George. Still aware of every horror they inflicted. That's when Helen stopped screaming. I'd been listening to her through the wall for days. Her pain, her fear, her desperate attempts to hold on to herself. But one morning, the screaming stopped, replaced by a silence. Then, Later that day, I heard that sound. The wet rattle. The call those things make. Helen was gone. I felt something break inside me. The last sort of hope I'd been clinging to. If Helen couldn't maintain herself, Helen with her sharp mind and iron will, what chance did I have? Dr. Fields confirmed it during his next exam. Subject 246 has completed transformation, he said to Dr. Vance. Cognitive function absent. Higher reasoning eliminated. Motor function nominal. Responds to basic stimuli. She'll be transferred to holding pen C this evening. He looked at me with something resembling satisfaction. You're doing better, Subject 247. Still maintaining awareness at 60% infection. Remarkable, really. We're learning so much from you. I wanted to kill him. The hunger was overwhelming now, and I could smell his blood. Could imagine the taste of his flesh. The monster they were creating wanted to tear him apart. But the man I'd been, the geometry teacher, the husband, the survivor, held on just enough to stop myself. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. They transferred Helen that night. I heard the gurney being wheeled past my door. Heard that horrible rattling call she made. Tried to call back to her. To let her know I was here. That she wasn't alone. But she was already gone. The thing on that gurney wasn't Helen Cosgrove anymore. It was just another monster wearing her face. I cried. Or tried. But the transformation had done something to my tear ducts. Nothing came out except a thick, dark fluid that the machines cataloged as ocular discharge, consistent with late-stage infection. I was running out of time. Dr. Vance came to see me again a few nights later. They're accelerating the program, she said without preamble. Command wants deployable units within 2 weeks. That means they're going to push the remaining subjects through transformation faster, you included. She looked at me, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. I can't stop them, but I can make it faster, less painful if you want. She was offering to kill me, to end this before they could finish turning me into a weapon. I wanted to say yes, wanted to beg her to do it, to end this nightmare. But I couldn't. Some stubborn part of me, the part that had survived the outbreak, that had kept 20 people alive as long as possible, that had refused to give up even when we were starving, wouldn't let me quit. I shook my head. The movement was jerky and uncoordinated. The infection was affecting my motor control. You're sure? Dr. Vance asked. Because once they complete the transformation, there's no coming back. You'll be gone. Just a thing they can point at enemies and release. I managed to croak out a single word. My voice was destroyed, barely human, but she understood. Why? Why hold on? Why endure this? Why not just let go? Because I was George Patterson. Because I'd promised myself I'd die human or not at all. Because giving them what they wanted, a mindless weapon, felt like letting them win. And maybe because part of me thought that if I could hold on long enough, I might find a way to stop them. Foolish, naive, impossible. But it was all I had left. Dr. Vance looked at me for a long moment, and then nodded. All right, I'll tell them you're still viable for continued observation. It'll buy you a few more days. She left. I lay there, feeling the infection spread through what remained of my body, and I planned. They'd made one mistake, one critical error. They'd told me where they were keeping the others. Helen and the transformed subjects, holding pen C, sub-basement. And they'd showed me that the infection made me stronger, faster, enhanced my senses. If I could just hold on to myself a little longer, if I could find the right moment, maybe I couldn't save myself. But maybe, I could save others from this fate. Or at least make sure Dr. Fields and his team couldn't keep doing this. The opportunity came 3 days later. Dr. Fields was running a stress test, seeing how much I could endure before cognitive function failure. He'd loosened my restraints slightly to allow him to monitor my motor responses. It wasn't much freedom, but it was enough. He leaned over me with his tablet, recording data, and I could smell him. Blood and meat and life. The hunger was overwhelming, consuming every thought. But beneath the hunger was something else. Purpose. I waited till he turned away, reaching for a syringe. Then I moved. The infection had changed me, made me stronger. I tore free of the loosened restraints with a strength that would have been impossible before. My gray, twisted hand grabbed Dr. Field's arm. He had time to look surprised, to try to pull away. Then I bit him. The taste of blood filled my mouth and the hunger screamed in satisfaction. But I forced myself to stop, to let go, to think past the animal urge to feed. Dr. Field stumbled back, clutching his arm. Blood poured between his fingers. His eyes were wide with shock and fear. "Guards!" he shouted. "Subject 247 has breached containment!" But I was already moving, off the gurney, shambling toward the door with that jerky, uncoordinated gait of the infected. I crashed through it. The lock was strong, but my infected body was stronger. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. I could hear boots pounding down corridors, voices shouting orders. But I knew where I was going. Sub-basement, holding pen C. I found the stairs and descended, moving faster than I should have been able to. The infection had taken my humanity, but given me this: strength, speed, and endurance. I burst into the sub-basement and found it. Rows of cells, chain-link walls from floor to ceiling. And inside, dozens of them. The infected, the transformed, the ones who'd been survivors once, before the facility turned them into weapons. Helen was in one of the cells. I recognized what was left of her, shambling in circles, making that rattling call. The guards were coming. I could hear them on the stairs, getting closer. I grabbed the cell doors. The locks were electronic, controlled by a panel near the entrance. I smashed it with my fist, felt bones break but didn't care. Sparks flew. The locks clicked open. All of them. Every cell, every holding pen. The infected poured out. They flooded into the corridor, shambling past me toward the stairs, toward the sounds and smells of living people above. I'd released them. Released them all. Helen shambled past me with recognition. I wanted to call out to her, to tell her I was sorry. Sorry for everything. But I had no voice. The guards reached the bottom of the stairs and opened fire, but there were too many infected, and bullets didn't stop them quickly enough. I watched as the tide of gray bodies overwhelmed the guards, pulled them down, teeth finding flesh. The infected would spread through the facility, through the doctors, the orderlies, the administrators, through everyone who participated in this nightmare. They'd wanted to weaponize the infected. Now they'd see how well it worked. I should have felt triumph, satisfaction, something. But all I felt was pity. I shambled after the others, up the stairs, into the chaos of the facility. Alarms screaming, gunfire screaming. The infected spread like a virus through the corridors. Each person they bit became another vector, another weapon. The facility was eating itself. I found Dr. Fields in his office, trying to barricade the door. The bite I'd given him was already turning gray, the infection spreading. He looked at me through the window, and I saw fear in his eyes. Good. I crashed through the door. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. I grabbed him. He screamed, begged, tried to explain that he'd just been following orders, doing his duty, trying to save humanity. I bit him again and again, not to feed, to punish. When I finally let go, he was dying. The infection would finish what I'd started, but he'd be dead before it completed. A small mercy he didn't deserve. I shambled out of his office and kept moving. The facility was in chaos now, infected everywhere, hunting, biting, spreading. The guards had fallen back to a secure area, trying to contain the outbreak, but it was too late. I found my way outside, burst through an emergency exit into the cool night air. The facility was surrounded by fences, watchtowers, armed guards, but they were all focused inward now, trying to stop the infection from spreading out. I shambled toward the fence. Part of me, the part that was still George Patterson, knew I should stop, should let them shoot me, end this horror show. But the infected part of me kept moving and couldn't stop. I reached the fence and started climbing. The guards saw me, opened fire. I felt bullets hit me, chest, shoulder, leg, but they didn't stop me. The infected didn't die from bullets unless you hit the brain. I made it over the fence and dropped to the other side, kept shambling forward into the darkness beyond. Behind me, I could hear the facility tearing itself apart. Screams and gunfire and chaos. I'd done that. George Patterson, geometry teacher, survivor, subject 247. I'd ended the experiment, saved future survivors from the same fate. Or I'd just unleashed more horror into an already dying world. I didn't know anymore. Couldn't think clearly enough to decide if what I'd done was right. All I knew was that I was free. Free of the restraints, the tests, the tortures. Free to shamble in the wasteland. To hunt. To feed. Free to be the monster they made me be. The last coherent thought I had before George Patterson finally slipped away completely was this. We should have taken our chances with the zombies at the school. At least then, we would have died on our own terms. The thing that used to be George Patterson shambled in the woods surrounding Fort Diedrich. Behind it, the facility burned. The infected had overrun it completely, and someone had triggered the failsafe. Incendiary devices designated to contain biological threats. Fire consumed the building, the experiments, the doctors, the infected, everything. But some of the infected had made it out. Dozens of them, spreading into the surrounding area, enhanced by the experiments, stronger and faster than the normal infected, carrying modified strains that would evolve the outbreak in new and terrible ways. The military would eventually contain the breach, would hunt down the escaped subjects, would classify what happened at Fort Detrick, bury it under layers of security clearance and official denial. But the damage was done. Subject 247 wandered for 3 more days before a sniper team finally found him and put a bullet through his brain. It died in the woods, alone, far from the elementary school where it had tried to save 22 people, far from the wife it had loved, far from everything that had made it human. In the end, George Patterson's story didn't end with dignity or meaning or hope. It ended as a cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the monsters aren't the shambling corpses in the streets. Sometimes they're the ones wearing lab coats, carrying clipboards, and claiming they're trying to save the world. And sometimes, the real horror isn't becoming a monster. It's staying aware enough to know what you've become. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I'm thinking about doing one more perspective from this group of people, but I'm not sure which one to do next. If you got any ideas, let me know. Until then, come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.